Hello, Truth Transistors. Welcome to another video, and today should be a very interesting topic. I forget what I titled the video, but something about Enoch and hell.
Something about conditional immortality.
Conditional immortality, yeah. And James Harding, I met through Chris Date when I did an interview with Chris Date a few weeks ago. And he told me I should talk to this guy, James Harding. So without further ado, let me have you introduce him. How are you doing, James?
Doing all right. Happy to be here.
All right.
Honored to be interviewed. I feel so, unworthy, but
yeah, me too. Absolutely. Let's start with, did you ever believe the traditional view, and was there a point where you switched, or when you became a believer, did you not necessarily have a specific view? Like, what is your background on this topic?
Yeah, so I did initially believe in the traditional view for no other reason than it is the traditional view. Sort of one of those things that when you become a Christian, it seems like it's just an automatic thing that you believe because it's what you hear in culture. You know, if you ever watched Looney Tunes when you were a kid, hell is depicted as this place below the earth burning with, well, I didn't literally believe it was below the earth, but anyways, it's depicted as this place where people are literally tormented in fire forever, and they're there, they're immortal, they're in pain. And so, you know, I picked it up from culture. I picked it up from what Christians were saying and what they said the Bible said. But at one point, I believe it was around 2019-ish, I just had this thought regarding Christ's substitutionary work. And the thought was something along these lines. If we always say that Christ took upon himself the penalty for our sins, but we also say that the penalty for our sins is eternal torment in hell, I don't see that Christ ever took that punishment upon himself. So it just seemed incongruent to me. And I think that thought planted a seed, and I started sort of slowly looking into the topic, but not even intentionally. One day I found a debate between Chris Date, who you had on and who suggested I come on. And I listened to it, and he made a great case for annihilationism. And that really got me on the road to looking into the view. I mean, he had almost admittedly convinced me just within that one debate. That's because I wasn't very knowledgeable as far as the evidence for the traditional view anyway. So it's not like I had a solid base for that either.
Right.
So I was kind of presented both bases at the same time, and the stronger one really seemed to be annihilationism. So I continued looking into the view, learning from Chris mainly, and before long I was convinced of conditional immortality, and that's how I got to believe that view.
I think I was probably 5 or 6 when I first heard, because I grew up in a Christian home, and I'm sure that even in secular homes, they tell kids you're either going to heaven or hell, just to kind of try to scare them into behavior or something. But yeah, like for 30 years, I didn't hear any alternate views. So I just assumed that's what the Bible taught. Now, I had been involved in several denominations for, growing up. So I was aware of different perspectives on different things. But it seemed like all of the ones I was involved with taught the same thing on hell. So it wasn't until I was about 35, which was about 10 years ago, that I first heard this perspective. And I learned over the years not to jump to conclusions. And a lot of people will do that without hearing out a matter, And so at least I had the perspective of being open. So I started looking into it, and the more I've looked into it, the more convinced I've become. So it's, and when I talk to other Christians, at first they're a little bit defensive, but some of them have, at least once they listen to me a bit, they'll say, well, maybe it's not a heresy. I don't know. Maybe you have some good points, but they're kind of afraid to, get outside of whatever, traditional thinking. Sometimes it can be difficult to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't speak. It gets back to what I said earlier about how this is just so deeply ingrained even in culture. So people just, they hear Christianity and immediately they connect the eternal torment view with Christianity, and it's like, when you suggest that you can be a Christian and abandon this view, to most people it just sounds like you're stripping away sort of a foundational, essential, inextricable part of the faith. But turns out, as you know, when you look into the issue more deeply, it's not like that at all.
Right. And I've always tried to be cautious about not jumping to something because I want to believe it or because it, and I wanted to be careful about that. So, some people think that this is some kind of a progressive view of some sort, which from my experience, most progressives are not annihilationists or conditionalists. They're universalists. Or they don't, if they believe in hell at all. But so most of the people I've seen that teach this view are pretty conservative, Bible believing Christians that I've seen talk about it, right? So, so Chris mentioned something about Enoch. So why don't you go through what you've learned from that and your connection with this topic of conditional immortality?
Yeah, well, so this is your show, so you obviously decide the flow and everything.
Sure.
But I think it would be better if we maybe backed up a little bit before getting
Okay.
to the first
Yeah. Where would you like to start?
Yeah. So toward the end, I think it was, of your last interview with Chris, I think I put something in the chat. I asked Chris where he stood on a particular phrase in Revelation 14, 9 through 11, that causes, some interpreters difficulties, at least on our side. And so basically he reiterated the view to which he's held for, I don't know, probably as long as he's been a conditionalist, or whatever. I don't know how long he's held this particular interpretation, but anyway. And it's the interpretation that I held to for a long time as well, because as I said earlier, I learned a lot from Chris. And I think it's probably what we would refer to as like the official, if you will, interpretation of Rethinking Hell that we offer. And I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, but I am part of the Rethinking Hell ministry, have been since I think January 1st, 2024 or so, alongside Chris Date, which is awesome. So where was I going with this? Yeah, anyways, I shared that interpretation that I'm going to bring up here in a moment with them for a long time, until I figured out another way of interpreting this particular phrase, which again we're going to get to, through the book of Enoch, and how it uses similar language and how it influenced the way that I now take that phrase. So to get a little bit more specific, Revelation 14, 9 through 11, we might as well just read it in whole, just so we can get it in our minds. It says, "And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, 'If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb.'" And then verse 11, which is where we're going to spend most of our time. "And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." So the particular phrase that I was talking about that causes conditionalist issues is that little phrase, "they have no rest day or night." And so the way Chris would interpret this, and the rest of the Rethinking Hell team, and again, I don't think it's a bad interpretation, it's just not the one that I find most compelling, the interpretation is, yeah, this is in fact depicting a scene in which people are being tormented forever and ever. But the question is, what does this scene symbolize in reality? Because in Revelation, you have a bunch of symbols, and these symbols, they are not the thing in reality. They merely symbolize an actual thing. Now, to give an example, in Revelation 1, verse 20, you have mention of, I think it's lampstands. And these lampstands are interpreted to be churches. So similarly, the idea here would be, well, yeah, you have a scene where people are being tormented forever, and this would be equated with the lampstands. But just as the lampstands in reality symbolize churches, this scene of eternal torment is just a symbol, and in reality, it symbolizes annihilation. And where they'll find support for that part, that it symbolizes annihilation, is in the very previous phrase that says the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. And there is a really strong case to be made that this language is language of destruction. I think you and Chris probably went through this last time. I'm not sure. We can go through it again. I don't know how much you want to rehash. But basically, actually, before I even say anything, you can stop me here and you can tell me whether you want to look a little bit more deeply into that first before getting into the rest.
Yeah, so for me, it was not as difficult to break down 1411 as it was 2010, because even in 1411, I could see how the smoke goes up forever, or the
smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean, it could be that the torment resulted in the smoke goes up, or the smoke that resulted in the torment goes up forever and ever. It doesn't necessarily mean that the torment goes up forever and ever. So the first approach I took was, if I was to read this directly, does it necessarily say eternal conscious torment? And I don't think it does. Although I can see how people can, it could mean that, but it also could mean that the smoke that resulted in the torment goes up forever and ever if it was taken literally. So it's not as clear cut as a lot of people would like to think, even taken literally. But it is one of those proof texts. So it is good to break it down and see what this could be referring to and all that stuff. So,
yeah. So I agree with you that the phrase, the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, in itself, if you just isolate that, I mean, it doesn't clearly communicate eternal torment at all, right? Yeah. Like you said, it could just be, and that's what I think is the case, the smoke of their torment just refers to the smoke that resulted from the torment they undergone, and this torment could just be a destructive torment, right? But the issue, or the interpretive difficulty, comes in if you merely isolate the next phrase, they have no rest day or night. Now that sounds on the surface a lot more like people who just are conscious and they have no rest day or night. This is, if you just isolate this phrase on its own, it's a lot harder to square with destruction or annihilationism.
I guess they're taking the forever and ever phrase and applying it to no rest day or night, because I would even say that no rest, it doesn't say no rest day and night forever and ever. It says no rest day and night, which could just mean for several days. I mean, so, but yeah, I can see how people would take that and understand it, because I did for so long myself. For me, the only verse that I would have to take either allegorically, and I can't explain it any other way, is Revelation 20:10, which is they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. To me, that's like the strongest language. But and even if I was going to take that literally, it only refers to the beast, false prophet, and dragon, whatever that is. So, but anyway, I'm getting off the verse you're talking about, but I'm not convinced that that's literal language anyway. But if I was just to because I believe that something that is as terrible as eternal conscious torment, there needs to be something clearly stated. And if the clearest passages are in Revelation, which is full of allegorical language already, it's kind of, it really weakens the case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we probably both had other videos where we talk about other proof texts and all that. We don't need to get into all that now, but
Right.
but yeah, like 1411, I think it's not as clear cut as it seems when people have a traditional mindset, but at the same time, I understand how people can look at that and think that's what it's saying. But yeah, like, but yeah. So, and I would also say it could mean that, as you stated yourself, it could mean eternal conscious torment. But yeah. So where would you like to go with this next then?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I agree with you that the phrase "day or night" in itself doesn't mean forever and ever.
Yeah.
Now, one could say that it's strongly implied because of the phrase
Right.
"forever and ever" used just prior. And while you can say, yeah, that's not that's possible, but it's not necessary, that's probably not, I don't think, going to convince many people.
Right.
If your response is just, well, yeah, okay, that's possible, but not necessary, I think a lot of people who are already minded toward the eternal torment view are just going to be like, well, if that's all you got, you know. But obviously, it's not all we got. Even the interpretation that Chris and the rest of the Rethinking Hell crew offer, and that I used to hold to, that interpretation is very strong in itself. The phrase "the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever." You can point to Isaiah 34 verses 9 and 10, where this phrase is taken from. And in that text, the language is applied to the city of Edom, which was destroyed. And obviously, yeah, it just doesn't communicate eternal torment at all. And
I'd like to, or finish your thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say also, you have Babylon, who in Revelation 19:3 is said to have smoke rise up from her forever and ever. But then if you look back in chapter 18, what was just said about Babylon, you read things like the city is in a single hour it's laid waste, it's burned up. And then you have an angel throwing a stone into the sea and saying, just like that, Babylon the Great will be found no more. So this language of smoke rising forever doesn't communicate eternal torment.
Yeah.
Very clearly, in the very same book, is applied to Babylon, which is said to be, well, it's said of her that she will be found no more. So we have very good reasons to take this language as supportive of our view. And if that's the case, then whatever this phrase means, they have no rest day or night, it's going to be congruent with that. It's not going to contradict it, obviously.
Right. I think Isaiah 34, like when I talk to a traditionalist about that, they assume that that's talking about the final judgment of the Edomites. But even if that's the case, the following verses after 10 seems to be problematic for that view, because you have animals dwelling there, and it says people will not dwell there any longer. And the following verses seem to debunk the idea that it's, even if it's the final judgment, that's the conclusion, is that it's eternal conscious torment. Because of course they say that there's undying worms there in there, which we know is also not, can be clarified as the bodies are dead, right? And probably symbolic language. I don't think there's literal undying worms, but just the language that's after verse 10 in Isaiah 34 is problematic for eternal conscious torment. It seems to be more favorable to destruction, right?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you that it's, I don't think it's referring to final judgment. I do think it's referring to
Yeah.
historical destruction of Edom. And not only so, but if we just grant, okay, it is referring to final judgment,
Yeah.
that doesn't get you to eternal torment at all.
Right. Either way, the language indicates destruction, whether it's the past Edomites or the future judgment.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
of, yeah. So,
but even if we were to just forget about Isaiah 34, just set it aside, ignore it altogether, the fact that Babylon is said to have smoke rising from her forever and ever, and it's said of her that she'll be no more and be laid waste in an hour, and all these things, we still have plenty of support for the idea that this phrase doesn't communicate eternal torment, but annihilationism. So I think we're on very strong footing as far as that goes.
yeah.
Now, the reason, and now we'll probably get into First Enoch very soon, is the reason that I disagree with Chris's and the rest of the Rethinking Hell teams. Well, I say the rest. I don't know what they all individually hold, but I assume most of them hold to the same interpretation.
So your volume is going up and down for some reason.
Nope.
I'll hear you fine, and then it'll kind of go down, and then it'll come back.
Okay, well, let me know if it keeps happening.
Okay.
I might have a fix for it if it continues. So, yeah. So, anyways, I think I was saying that the reason I no longer hold to the interpretation that Chris raised in your last interview with him is because, well, number one, I think I found something that accounts for the language better. And number two, it's always struck me as odd that in the same verse you would have language like the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, communicating annihilation, but then immediately after that you have and they have no rest day or night, which would apparently be a scene of eternal torment symbolizing annihilation. It seems like there's no issue in my mind with a symbol in which you have people being tormented forever symbolizing annihilation. That's no problem. What seems odd to me, though, is suggesting that you have a scene here apparently of eternal torment right next to language that we take as directly communicating annihilation. It seems to me that at the very least within this same verse, you would expect the symbol to be coherent with itself. You wouldn't have part of it being straight up annihilation language right next to language of eternal torment symbolizing annihilation. I don't know if I'm communicating my thought very clearly there. And like we said, we don't necessarily think it is, on its own at least, communicating eternal torment, that phrase. They have no rest day or night. But for those who think it is, it strikes me as odd. And that's why I wasn't entirely satisfied with the interpretation that Chris offers and that I learned from him and held on to for a while. And it got me to look into, okay, is there a better way of interpreting this passage? And when I decided to look into it, one of the passages, or one of the commentaries I looked at was Craig Keener's commentary on Revelation 14:11. And I could actually just pull it up right here. Here you go. It says, give me just a second here. So, by the way, he says this about 14:11. He says the eternal smoking of Edom, night and day, night and day, contrast 4:8 and 12:10, is described in similar terms in Isaiah 34:10. So Keener makes the same connection. He funnily enough, he says, but there the meaning is desolation, whereas here it is eternal burning and torment. Now that in itself I find kind of funny because he acknowledges, the same language in Isaiah 34:10 refers to desolation, but here it means this completely different thing. And I don't think that's warranted. And obviously, he's not concluding that based on the language itself, because then he would be forced to say, well, yeah, it communicates desolation in Isaiah, well, it also communicates desolation here. So the reason he doesn't do that is for other considerations that obviously I wouldn't agree with. But here's what got me to look into First Enoch and got me to finally find what I thought was a satisfying interpretation of Revelation 14:11. Commenting on 14:13, he says, the writer of First Enoch noted that the wicked would have no rest, but the righteous dead would have great rewards. So he notes that the First Enoch said that the wicked would have no rest, and then he offers that in parentheses the reference, First Enoch 99:14, and First Enoch 99:14 says, "Woe to them who reject the measure and eternal heritage of their fathers, and whose souls follow after idols, for they shall have no rest." So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, okay, let me look into this. I'll click the reference and go to the passage and see what it says. And turns out, when you do that, I think you have you have ample reason to suddenly take the phrase as a phrase that's entirely congruent with annihilation. So there's in this passage where verse 14 is situated, you have a series of different woes. And if you back up from verse 14 to verse 11, you have, woe to you who spread evil to your neighbors, for you shall be slain in Sheol. So just 3 verses apart, you have mention of the wicked having no rest, they shall have no rest, and also mention of them being slain. You shall be slain in Sheol. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever the phrase "they shall have no rest" means, it's obviously not. It's not in tension with the final punishment being death and destruction, because that's what's going on here. You go on to verse 16, and it says that God will destroy them with the sword. So, I mean, you have mention of them being slain, of them being destroyed with the sword, in the very same little passage where verse 14 is located. So at that point, I'm thinking, okay, well, on the surface, it sure seems like it's compatible with annihilation being the final lot of the wicked. So it's got to be the same in Revelation, I'm sure. And by the way, you can cut me off whenever you want.
Sure. I'm just listening.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, okay, well, that in itself alone gives me more confidence that this phrase does in fact fit with destruction as the final punishment. Now my question after that was, okay, well, if it is compatible with annihilation, which I'm happy to see, what does it mean? What does it mean if it is in fact compatible with annihilationism? And that got me to go down another path, looking through Enoch and trying to figure that out. And we can get into that here momentarily, but if you want to say anything, go right ahead. I've been monologuing for a bit.
Tell me again, what passage did you just read about they will have no rest?
This is First Enoch 99:14. Okay.
When they don't worship when they worship the idols, is that what it was?
Yeah, it says, woe to them who reject the measure and eternal heritage of their fathers, and whose souls follow after idols, for they shall have no rest.
Okay.
And it just turns out that in Revelation 14, you have who is said to have no rest. I mean, it's worshippers of the beast, right? They're people who are following after idols.
Interesting.
And I mean, there's more than that as well. I mean, I think even the phrase here, woe to them who reject the measure and eternal heritage of their fathers, I think that's, it fits very well with the beginning of Revelation 14. let me pull something up here. Well, I can't find it. So anyways, point is, at the beginning of Revelation, it says, "Then I looked, and behold," I'm reading from verse 1. "Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads." Now, I don't know if you and I would agree on this, but I think the 144,000 is a symbolic number that represents like 12,000 people from each tribe of Israel. And so the point is, you only have a remnant from each tribe who's actually subscribing to Jesus being the Messiah, and the rest of Israel are rejecting Christ as Messiah. Now, this language in 1 Enoch 99:14, woe to them who reject the measure and eternal heritage of their fathers, I think this is exactly what they are doing here. They're rejecting the long predicted, long awaited, long prophesied about Messiah that's talked about in their scriptures. And so they are, in fact, by rejecting Christ, rejecting the measure and eternal heritage of their fathers. And they're following after idols, taking upon themselves the mark of the beasts. And instead of them, that they shall have no rest. And that's exactly what Revelation 14 says. So right there, I'm like, okay, I mean, there seems to be something to this. And even I was very surprised, and this strengthened the connection I was making in my mind all the more. So let me read Revelation 14, 18 through 20. It says, "And another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle. 'Put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe.' So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia." Now listen to what we see in 1 Enoch 100, verses 3 to 4. So again, this is just 5 verses after the place where it says they shall have no rest. It says, "The horse shall walk through the blood of sinners up to his chest." And we just ended off Revelation 14, where it says that blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle. So already you have both texts who are sort of using a horse's chest as the measuring stick for how high blood will be. And then 1 Enoch goes on, 1 Enoch 100, verses 3 to 4 goes on, "And the chariot shall sink up to its top, or sink down up to its top. In those days, the angels shall descend into the secret places." And again, in Revelation 14, it speaks of different angels being in action here. And going back to 1 Enoch, "They shall gather together," that is the angels, "they shall gather together into one place all those who gave aid to sin." And in the Revelation 14 passage we just read, what are they doing? The angels gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. So what you have going on in both cases is angels working together to gather sinners together into one place for judgment, and the result being blood accumulating as high as like the chest of a horse. Now, all that to me doesn't seem like coincidence. It seems to me like there's very much linguistic borrowing going on the part of Revelation, borrowing language from 1 Enoch. And so at that point, the question you should ask is, okay, well, if Revelation is borrowing language from 1 Enoch, then if 1 Enoch has language of there being no rest, then surely whatever that means in the book of Enoch can help us understand what it means in Revelation. And so before, we can get into that in a little bit. I want to pause myself again so you can jump in and say what you were saying.
It does seem odd that, like, if it's talking about like the torment of souls, but then it talks about the blood and the horses and all that. So it seems to be, if the way most people understand it, it seems to be going back and forth between physical and spiritual or soul or whatever. And that if that's the approach that somebody takes, it seems like it doesn't seem like a logical way of wording things, right? If you're talking about physical and spiritual or something, to go back and forth between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I understand how
most people would understand it. And so yeah, when it says stuff like the blood of the horses or even the animals will dwell there in Isaiah or whatever, that seems to be going back to the physical. And there's no indication in any of those passages that there's some kind of living soul or, conscious entity there. It just, that would have to be inferred somehow, right?
Yeah, well, I think that something that people would do good to realize is that the word soul in Scripture doesn't always refer, and I mean, debatably never, right? But this is, and that would be a tangent. But there are certainly a number of times where the word soul obviously doesn't refer to sort of an immaterial part of somebody. For example, in Psalm 7, verse 2, or verses 1 to 2, the psalmist says, "O Lord my God, in you do I take refuge. Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me, lest, like a lion, they tear my soul apart, rending it in pieces with none to deliver." Now, what's obviously not going on here is that the psalmist isn't fearing that his enemies are going to use their swords and chop his immaterial, ghostly part of him up. He's just fearing for his life. My soul here just refers to myself. Deliver me, God, because I don't want my enemies to tear me apart, to rend me in pieces, is what he's saying. So,
I was going to say, I'm looking forward to hopefully the debate you're going to have. You mentioned to me, and it's been delayed already, you said, but
a couple times.
If you want to, because I'm interested to hear that, because I lean towards a conscious soul in the intermediate state, but I know you and Chris do not, so I'm looking forward to that. What do you think about when Jesus says, we don't have to go deep into this, but I'm just curious, when he says, "Do not fear man who can kill the body and not kill the soul," what do you think he's talking about there? If they can't kill the soul, what is it?
Yeah, so I think what's going on in that passage is Jesus is speaking somewhat poetically here. So first of all, the word for, I forget how much of the quote you actually quoted, so I'll just quote it off the top of my head. Do not fear those who can destroy, or do not fear man who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna. Now, the verb destroy there in Greek is apollumi, and the word for soul is psyche. And when you look in Scripture, you can find instances where people do, in fact, apollumi the psyche. They do destroy a person's psyche, their soul, their life, is what it means. And so the distinction that Jesus is actually trying to draw here, I think, is not between a physical body and a non-physical soul, but between a person's, you could say a person's body, but it's because he has the resurrection in mind. Here's actually a good example of this. Luke 21, verse 16 through 19. It says you will, and this is actually a parallel passage. If you scroll up, you have Jesus telling, or wait a second. So this is a parallel passage. In verse 16 of Luke 21, you have Jesus saying, "You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you they will put to death." So this is what he was just saying to his disciples in Matthew 10, just prior to verse 28. I think it's verses like 20 to 23, somewhere around there. And he goes on to say, "You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your lives." So notice these two statements that he puts next to each other. He says on one hand,
I've lost some already. I've already perished some hairs.
I've got too much on my head. I could give you some. So in verse 16, toward the end of verse 16, notice what he says. He says, "Some of you they will put to death." But then he goes on to say, almost in the same breath, "But not a hair of your head will perish." Well, if you take that woodenly literally, he's wrong. Because if you are in fact put to death, well, your body's going to decompose. Your hair will perish. Right? So it's like, well, what are you saying here, Jesus? They're going to put you to death, but not a hair of your head will perish? What sense does that make? Well, you have to realize it's not woodenly literal. What he's saying is, yeah, they'll put you to death, but not a hair of your head will perish because, verse 19, by your endurance you will gain your lives, meaning by your endurance you'll gain your lives back. He's talking about resurrection.
Right.
Yeah, so though your hair may perish, if we're speaking very literally and precisely, yeah, what you would say is your hair will in fact perish when they put you to death, but I'll bring it back. So the sense in which he's saying not a hair of your head will perish is it's not gone forever.
Right.
That's exactly what's going on in Matthew 10, I think. He's saying, yeah, in reality, what he's saying, if you don't take it woodenly literally, is, yeah, they'll kill you, they'll kill your body and your soul, but it's not gone because I'm going to give it back to you in resurrection. You'll gain your life back. You'll gain your being back in resurrection.
Yeah. I'm definitely open on this topic because even though I lean towards a conscious soul and the intermediate state, I'm also aware of all the passages that say the dead know nothing and they're asleep and all that kind of stuff. And I will also say that it's compatible. Either view is compatible with either view. So I know somebody that believes eternal conscious torment, but believes in soul sleep in the intermediate state.
Yeah.
So it's not, the intermediate state really has nothing to do with the final judgment anyway. But it's an interesting, it's an interesting topic. But so where were we going to before we got sidetracked there? Unless you had another thought on that.
Well, I might as well give you one because we went off on the tangent anyway.
Sure.
But there's a similar passage in 4th Maccabees to Matthew 10:28, and you can read in this passage here. So 4th Maccabees chapter 18, verses 17 through 19. You can read these two statements next to each other. It says, "Brothers, let us die like brothers for the sake of the law." So again, I'll just emphasize that again. "Brothers, let us die like brothers for the sake of the law." Goes on, "Let us not fear him who thinks he is killing us." Well, hold on. Are you guys going to die like brothers, or is this guy only thinking he's killing you? If you take it woodenly literally, it just doesn't make sense. But what you realize is there's a sense in which he only thinks he's killing them because of a future resurrection. Yeah, you think you're putting me to death, but God's going to bring me back. But there's another sense in which, you do die temporarily. So it's very often a question of sense. Like in what sense is a certain thing being said? Because you can have two statements that on the surface sound contradictory if you take them woodenly literally, but if you don't, then the tension's resolved. And I mean, we speak like this all the time. Like if we have a one-on-one game of basketball and you beat me and I'm embarrassed and I don't think I played as well as I can, I might say, well, truth be told, Rob, you didn't win, I lost. Now, if you take that woodenly literally, you'd be like, yeah, what are you saying? That's stupid. If I won, and well, then you lost by definition. You can't say that I didn't win, you lost, right? The one implies the other. But of course, statements like that, we speak like this all the time. There's an expression built in that statement. It's like,
I died laughing.
right. Yeah.
Right.
So he didn't win, I lost just means like, I don't think I performed in line with my actual capabilities. I didn't play well. I was whatever. I threw the game. It's not because he beat me at my best type of thing. And so I don't think there's warrant for reading Matthew 10:28 woodenly literally. I think that just like the similar passage in 4th Maccabees and the passage, there's some poetic sort of speech, non-literal speech going on.
Yeah, and I was just thinking also about death and rest for a second, and it's kind of, maybe this is a meandering again, but I was just thinking about this because you know how like when the Israelites were in the wilderness and they were going to enter the land of rest, well, it's just probably symbolic that they would finally enter into rest in a symbolic way. I don't think that's they were necessarily rested when they got there, but this whole life is a struggle, and it won't be till the resurrection and all things are made new that we have full rest. I mean, there is a sense of when you're in Christ and we can rest on Christ, but it might be more of a rest on the assurance of what is to come more than the here and now, because this here and now is always going to be a struggle, right? There's always pain and sorrow. Excuse me. And so when we say rest, it's like we have peace in what is to come more than what is happening now. So like, yeah, what do you think about that idea where it says to enter into his rest, and in a sense we can because we have trust in where we're going, but we're never going to have full rest in this life.
So are you,
Does that make sense?
Well, I could be mistaken. Are you referring to a particular passage? Are you referring to?
Well, I know in Hebrews they talk about a lot about the rest.
So the passage I thought you were referring to toward the end, at least, is like Matthew 10, sorry, not 10:28, 11:28, where he says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest."
Yeah. There's that. There's also in Hebrews where it says entering into a better rest, those kinds of things, which I think in a sense, like, even though it's promised that once we're in Christ, we can have rest in him, it's more of a rest in the assurance of what is to come than it is in this life. I don't know that we'll have full rest in this life, right? Like,
yeah. Well, again, it's often a question of sense, right? Like if you can say, let's say you're having a really bad day or something, and your friend comes over to your house, knocks at your door, and says, "Hey, let's turn that frown upside down. Let's go to the gym. Let's do something. Let's get physical. Let's get active." And you do that. Well, you can say in a meaningful sense that you're resting from your say mental anguish, whatever you're going through. So you're resting in one sense, but you're not resting in the sense that you're doing physical stuff. You're at the gym, or you're playing a sport, or whatever you're doing. So you have to ask, rest from what in every specific context here to know exactly what's being talked about, because it's not just rest altogether. You're resting from literally everything. That's just obviously not the reality that we experience.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I was just thinking, because they will never enter the rest, which I guess even in this life, if they're not in Christ, but they're not going to have the resurrected bodies of eternity where there's no pain or suffering. So I guess in two senses, they're not entering into the rest.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's the thing. I think there is a sense in which they enter rest because, say, Job 3, for example. Job 3 here, he's lamenting his current state of affairs, and he's hoping that he would have died at birth. And he says, "For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept, then I would have been at rest." So there's a sense in which the dead rest, but there's also a sense in which they're not. They're not chilling on the beach with their feet kicked up.
Yeah.
So it's always a question of sense. So I think we're probably going to circle back here to Revelation 14. So in that sense, as annihilationist, there's a sense in which we believe that they will rest in the sense of death, right? They're not going to be at that point suffering anymore or anything. So there is that sense of rest, but there's also the question is now, okay, in what sense are they not resting? In what sense do they not have rest? Is there a way to understand this? Is there actually a sense in which they don't have rest if they're destroyed? And I think there is. So, and again, this is something I found an answer to in the Book of Enoch itself. And actually, before I even mention those lines of thought, let me just read, if I can, a couple of things here from my article. It's an article that's.
Do you want to share anything, or do you want to just read it? I can put the share screen on if you want.
Oh, maybe I could do that. Let me make this a little bit bigger before I do. Okay, so if I go to presenter, share screen. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So let me click over to my article here. So just to set the table a little bit, this article is currently up on the Rethinking Hell website. If you just search for if you do a Google search for Rethinking Hell Trent Horn, it'll come up. It's a 3-part article, and this is part 3 of it. And in it, I discuss much of what I've been discussing tonight about First Enoch. And so let me just read this little passage here, because I think it might help a little bit to understand why First Enoch is relevant. And I don't remember everything I've written, so we'll see as we go through it. Still in Revelation 14:11, another statement is worthy of attention, namely that beast worshippers have no rest day or night. According to Trent, it is the common sense interpretation that the damned endure unending suffering. Is that really the case? I don't think so. Common sense would not have us read this statement in a way that contradicts the fact that smoke rising communicates complete destruction. So what is the correct interpretation? Well, to answer that, let me suggest that the non-canonical Book of Enoch might be of service. According to Robert Henry Charles, First Enoch has had more influence on the New Testament than has any other apocryphal or pseudepigraphic work. So, I mean, that's saying a lot about First Enoch. And in harmony with Charles, Ephraim Isaac says that there is no doubt that the New Testament world was influenced by its language and thought. And especially germane to the present case, in the next sentence, Isaac notes that First Enoch influenced the revelation with numerous points of contact. And then after that, I get into what I shared earlier about the blood being as high as a horse to show that there is, in fact, influence. So yes, First Enoch can be very helpful in better understanding the New Testament in certain areas, especially Revelation. Now, what exactly the they have no rest means is what I want to get into, because we've already looked at the fact that the language is compatible with the final destiny of the unrighteous being destruction. In fact, actually, I could offer a little bit more on that than I did earlier, and I'll just continue reading from the article because it's right there, so might as well. Here I say the fate of the wicked, according to the fifth and final section of First Enoch, which is chapters 91 to 107, is a violent death. The last woe is no less clear, saying that the Most High shall, quote, destroy you all with the sword, in 99:16. In the previous chapter, we read, quote, and now know ye that ye are prepared for the day of destruction. Wherefore do not hope to live, ye sinners, but ye shall depart and die, for ye know no ransom. Woe to you who set at naught the words of the righteous, for ye shall have no hope of life. Further, we read that the spirits of those who died in righteousness shall live and rejoice. Their spirits shall not perish, whereas the names of the sinners shall be blotted out from the book of life and the books of the Holy One. Their seeds shall be destroyed forever, and their spirits shall be slain. Also, similar to they shall have no rest in 99:14, the previous woe in 99:13 says that the wicked shall have no peace. And whatever you shall have no peace means, it's not that the wicked are expected to forever experience distress or something like that. Since the previous chapter says, quote, therefore they shall have no peace, but die a sudden death. So instead, it's meant to be a point of contrast with the notion that there shall be peace to the righteous in the name of the eternal Lord, according to 1 Enoch 58:4, a peace grounded in the fact that, quote, the days of their life shall be unending, and the days of the holy without number. And as we read elsewhere, there shall be length of days with that Son of Man, and the righteous shall have peace and an upright way in the name of the Lord of spirits forever and ever. So I'm going to say, likewise, there's no reason, again, pause me whenever you want. Likewise, there is no reason to think that they shall have no rest is inconsistent with death being the punishment of the wicked. In fact, we have every reason to think otherwise. Aside from the immediate context strongly supporting that it is, we can find further evidence of this when we look at the way this kind of language is used in an earlier section of First Enoch. And here we get into what exactly they have no rest might mean, which might help us interpret what it means in Revelation 14. So in 1 Enoch 38:2, a rhetorical question is asked. It says, where will be the resting place of those who have denied the Lord of spirits? And the implied answer to that is nowhere. They won't have a resting place. Now, just a few verses later, in 38:5-6, the author goes on to say that kings and rulers shall perish, and that, quote, no one shall be able to induce the Lord of the spirits to show them mercy, for their life is annihilated. So clearly, they're not having a resting place doesn't mean that they'll live forever in a restless state. And in fact, in a show of sarcasm, the same author later answers his own rhetorical question, saying that, quote, worms shall be their bed in 46:6, essentially to say, well, I'm not being entirely accurate in implying that they won't have a resting place. See, they'll rest in a bed of worms feasting on their corpses. So in the very next line, he adds that they shall have, oh, actually, never mind. That's a tangent. Let's not get into that. We've already been on a tangent. So the point is, it seems to me that they shall have no rest likely means one of two things. The first thing it could mean, and this is based on 1 Enoch 62:14. First thing it could mean is that unlike the righteous who, quote, shall eat and rest and rise. Oops, I just did something, clicked off. Okay, I'm back. Unlike the righteous who shall eat and rest and rise with that Son of Man forever and ever, the wicked will never get to enjoy resting with the Son of Man in the world to come. So this gets back a little bit to what we just talked about as far as the different senses in which one can have rest, but also not have rest. They may well rest in the sense that they're dead and they're not experiencing anything anymore. So you can call that rest in some sense.
Yeah.
But there is a legitimate sense in which they don't have rest, which is they won't be able to, as 1 Enoch 62:14 says, rest with the Son of Man forever and ever. That's in fact a form of rest they don't have. But a second thing that it could mean, the language of not having any rest, is that they'll have no rest during the outpouring of wrath leading to their destruction. So in 1 Enoch 63:1, we read that kings who possess the earth implore God to grant them a little respite, that is a little rest, from his angels of punishment to whom they were delivered. And remember, they're delivered to angels of punishment in Revelation 14 as well. So the respite here is respite from his angels of punishment. And in 66:1, we read that, quote, the angels of punishment bring judgment and destruction on all who dwell on the earth. Now, in 63:6, still flowing from 63:1, we read that the kings will say, quote, we long for a little rest, but find it not, and darkness is our dwelling place forever and ever. Now, again, I clicked off. I'm sorry. Don't know if you see that when I click off, but okay, I'm back. So to know what it means that darkness is their dwelling place forever and ever, which they say immediately after saying that they long for a little rest and find it not. To know what it means, we can just look back to 1 Enoch 46:6, where the clause, darkness shall be their dwelling, runs directly parallel to the clause, worms shall be their bed, meaning that both clauses communicate the same fate. So in 63:6, we see that the lack of rest that kings have ends in their annihilation. And not just that, but their lack of rest, the rest that they seek to have is during the outpouring of wrath, it's during the time that the angels of punishment are bringing upon them judgment. But that judgment ends in annihilation. It ends in destruction. So that can help us understand, okay, well, maybe in Revelation 14, that's also the case. They have no rest day or night just refers to them having no rest during that period where the angels of punishment are inflicting the wrath of God upon them. But that ends in destruction, in line with the language of smoke rising forever and ever from them. Mm-hmm. So right there, we have two plausible ways of understanding the phrase, they shall have no rest day or night in Revelation 14. And this is essentially, well, so I'm not exactly sure where I land on the specific interpretation I take. I lean toward the second one, the one where it's about them not having rest during that outpouring of wrath inflicted by the angels' punishment. But that other one where it's just they have no rest with that Son of Man forever and ever, I think that's also possible. One of the two, I think, can be the case. And in fact, I find either of those two far and beyond more compelling than the traditional view that posits eternal torment. Because, I mean, this is based on what we read in a book that was very obviously influencing the language used in Revelation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You jump in.
Well, I was thinking of, I'm kind of leaning towards this idea of, in Hebrews 3, it's talking about they always go astray in their heart. They have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And I think in Hebrews, it's in the context of the Sabbath and then the greater rest, what the Sabbath symbolizes. In this case, of the full rest of Christ. And when I think about that, I think of a conscious rest, not an unconscious one. So,
Right.
So I think it is accurate to say that the lost will never enter God's rest when it comes to that. Absolutely. And it's not talking about rest like people rest when they're dead or they're
Right.
asleep when they're dead, but entering the rest of Christ, that they will never enter into it. So
Right.
that's kind of what makes the most sense to me, although I can see that perspective that while they're being destroyed, they're not in rest either. But
yeah, they're not being granted the respite that they want,
right.
as the whoever it was, the kings and rulers or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could read this final paragraph because I think it's helpful and sums it up pretty well. And again, the first option is the one that I think you're leaning toward right now, and I think there's reason to lean toward it in the context of Revelation itself. So let's just go ahead and finish this little section here. Either of these possibilities also seem like they apply well to Revelation 14:11. We can understand them having no rest as a direct point of contrast with Revelation 14:13, which says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." So, and let me just go here. Many good things shall be given to you. No, never mind. Well, I might as well just read it because I'm there. So, for all good things, says 1 Enoch 103:3, and joy and honor are prepared for and written down for the souls of those who have died in righteousness. Many good things shall be given to you, the offshoot of your labors. So again, this is very, it's like 5 verses after that passage that says they shall have no rest in 1 Enoch 99:14. And it sounds a lot like what Revelation 14:13 reads, if you check it out. But anyways, I go on to say, unlike the righteous who will enjoy rest with Jesus Christ in the new creation, the unrighteous will never get to enjoy such rest, but will instead be deprived of continuance and length of days forever and ever. And then I go on to explain again the part about, or the other interpretation according to which no rest is just them having no rest during the outpouring of wrath. So yeah, I think both interpretations are pretty. They have their strengths. They're both there, and like I said, I think they're both much more compelling than a traditionalist interpretation. So
right. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Yeah.
So now, just to try to maybe tie a bow on that part of it, let's go back to Revelation 14:11. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. Now, we already agree this is language that very directly communicates destruction, based on Isaiah 34, which even Craig Keener grants, even though he doesn't understand Revelation 14 the way we do. He grants that this language in Isaiah 34 refers to desolation or destruction. And so it goes on, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast. So what this means, again, we can take it one of two ways. The one that you seem to lean toward, or the other way that I seem to lean toward, but I'm honestly not even sure which of the two, but both of them seem rather compelling to me. Mm-hmm. And what this does, either interpretation you take, there's no longer this apparent tension between the two phrases. Right now, instead of saying, well, the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, is an idiom that refers to annihilation, and they have no rest day or night is a scene in which eternal torment is occurring, but it symbolizes annihilation. Now we can just say no, but both directly communicate annihilation. The smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever communicates annihilation directly. It's an idiom that refers to that in the Old Testament and later in Revelation concerning Babylon. And they have no rest day or night just means that they will, well, it either means that they will have no rest with that Son of Man forever and ever, as which would fit with Revelation 14:13. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, because they'll be able to rest from their labors. Or it could refer to the angels of punishment inflicting wrath unceasingly upon the unrighteous until they finally are destroyed and they perish. But during that time, they have no rest, just like in First Enoch. So yeah, that's basically, that's in sum, that is what Chris wanted me to come onto your show to discuss, is that particular passage, that phrase, and how First Enoch can help us interpret it better.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely. Like, we know that Enoch and Maccabees and those other books were from the mindset of the Jewish people. So they definitely, we get an insight of what they were thinking in many ways. And so that's an interesting. So when we see these passages, we could be like, it could be, it's initially written to for the Jewish people to understand, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there might be some differences, like Romans and the books to the Gentiles might be a little different, but a lot of them are. But even those are like, there's references to the Old Testament all over the place. So
yeah,
it's very important to understand, like, not just the Old Testament, but also like what they would have known, because I think a lot of the Gentiles that were being preached to were in Jewish synagogues, even in Gentile nations. So they were kind of being influenced by the Jewish synagogues as well. So anyway, that's kind of a tangent, but yeah, like, yeah, I find Enoch 1 to be very like interesting, or First Enoch, or however you want to say that, but
First Enoch, yeah,
and a lot of stuff in there that could be that I haven't seen a lot that's incompatible necessarily with Scripture, but I'd have to like do a deep dive study to see if anything specifically does. But
yeah, well, so like I said before we started recording, I'm no Enoch expert. What I know about Enoch is only this very it's what I've studied, because it directly relates to hell, to annihilation,
right?
And so the book more broadly, what it teaches, which teachings in it are compatible with Scripture or which aren't, I'm not too sure of all of that. But one thing that I have seen, though, is, and this is a pretty big deal, the Son of Man, according to the book of First Enoch, is Enoch. So it gets the Son of Man wrong, like who it is. We obviously believe it's Jesus.
I see.
First Enoch gets the identity wrong.
Okay.
So for that reason, it's most definitely not legit. It's not inspired. It's not canon. But it still was a valuable piece of literature that has a lot of good to say. It has a lot of things we can learn from, if anything, if nothing else, how certain phrases are used, right? Like in this case, you want to know what "they shall have no rest" means, well, you can look to First Enoch, because it had numerous points, or it influenced Revelation in numerous points of contact. It's said to have influenced the language and thought of certain passages of Scripture. So it is valuable in that sense, but it's not a book you turn to confirm doctrine.
Right.
Like,
Uh, yeah.
just to give an example of what I mean by that, like, for example, if First Enoch said, God the Father possesses a physical body. Now, I don't believe that. But if it said that and somebody wanted to prove that their contention that the Father has a physical body, he could not turn to First Enoch to prove it.
Yeah, you need to use the Bible itself to prove
Yeah,
that.
you would need to turn
Yeah.
to canonical scripture. So
Mhm.
you don't confirm doctrine with First Enoch. And I know that some people are going to be confused by what I mean by that, and some are going to think, "Well, isn't that
Yeah.
what you're doing right now? Aren't you
Yeah.
confirming your reading of Revelation, your annihilationist reading of it through First Enoch?" No, there's a distinction between what I mean by confirming doctrine and turning to this book to glean what certain phrases mean. One is turning to a book that has certain phrases to understand how those phrases are used in that day. So it's a linguistic thing,
Yeah.
whereas in other words, we're treating it more as a dictionary, so to speak, kind of, or a dictionary slash lexicon slash whatever,
Yeah.
versus like turning to it and saying, "Oh, Enoch says this is going to happen, therefore that's going to happen." You can't do that.
Right. And it seems like you responded to, or AI Matrix said a similar thing on the comments there. Said, "Son of Man, is man equal Adam? Anderson equals Son of Man?" So sounds like he was on the same thought process of Son of Man there. Um, obviously, no, we believe the Son of Man is Jesus, at least in Scripture, right? Um, and I wanted to read real quick, unless you had more thoughts that you wanted to get into on this topic.
Regarding this specific passage
Mhm.
and First Enoch, I don't think I have anything else that I
Okay,
have to share at the moment.
because I wanted to read this, and I know Chris didn't think it was a big proof or thing for anything, but I just wanted to read through this because I think there's some very similar language to Revelation 14:11 as well, in Leviticus 6:8 through 13. So I'm just going to read through it. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall be on the hearth, on the altar, on, all night until the morning, and the fire of the altar shall be kept burning on it. And the priest shall put on his linen garment and put his linen undergarment on his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar, and put them beside the altar. Then he shall take off his garments and put on other garments, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it. It shall not go out. The priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and he shall arrange the burnt offering on it, and shall burn on it the fat of the peace offerings. Fire shall be kept burning on the altar continually. It shall not go out. I think it's interesting at the very least. And I do think that God's wrath is symbolized in these sacrifices, right? It's supposed to be I know there's different views of atonement, and I'm not sure what your perspective is, but I believe it's like instead of we who deserve it, it's on this animal, and of course Jesus is the Lamb of God, and so it uses that similar language, but we know what happened to those animals. They were turned into ashes, and and the fire that was continually burning isn't burning now. And I'm not sure if it just was going, it was continually burning for an extended number of hours, or the whole time that they were, I don't know. But anyway, but it uses that language like the fire shall be burn continually; it shall not go out. It talks about them being the animals being turned to ashes. So I find that to be interesting, and that's what this book is all about, by David Aaron Betty. Hell is Made Holy. It's just another perspective, but I find it to be interesting as well. But
so my first inclination is probably similar to Chris's, which
yeah,
is I'm not sure I really see anything here, but let me just see if I'm at least getting the idea right.
yeah,
So is the idea that because the language here is similar to something like in Isaiah 34,
yeah,
and the animals, the offerings that are given are we know what happens to them. There's no secret there. They're killed. They're slain, and because that's the case here, then when we go to a text like Isaiah 34 that uses similar language, that implies that that's the fate that they suffer as well. So in this case, in Leviticus, you have the scene applying to substitution to substitutes, and in a text like Isaiah, you have it applying to people who have no substitutes, who take on that
mm-hmm.
experience themselves. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, it's similar. He also says that he believes Revelation 14:11 and Isaiah 34 are pointing directly to the daily sacrifice. So it's not just similar language. It's he believes what happens in Revelation 14:11 is directly pointing to the daily sacrifice, except instead of those animals, it's those people.
Yeah, I mean,
it's and it's just an interesting consideration. And he has a whole book explaining why, but but it is interesting that language is similar, and so he's convinced that when the Jewish mind read it at that time, that's what they would have, that language, that's what they would think about.
I honestly have to look into it deeper. I don't want to discount the fact that I could be wrong and just not seeing it in the moment.
Right.
But I'm also not willing to just endorse that.
But you do see similar language, right? Like,
well, that's just it. It's not, to me, it doesn't seem that similar. I mean, it seems very.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the clearest example of similar language that you see between the two?
Well, like when it says, "Fire shall kept burning on the altar continually; it shall not go out." That's one of them. So the fire is continually burning; it doesn't go out. And then I think it says, let's see, I'm looking at a different translation. Let's see. Morning, it mentions morning and evening. There's the morning and evening sacrifices. So when the term day and night is used, he believes it's referring to that phrase. Now, what I read to you was the ESV, but he looks into the translations from Hebrew to like Assyrian texts and Greek texts, which is most likely what they were reading in the New Testament. So when John was quoting this passage or passages like it, the wording was more similar to the Assyrian texts. So, I mean, I haven't finished this book, so I'm still not fully grasping it, but I do definitely see similar language in that passage to like the smoke goes up forever and ever, and that kind of a thing. Um,
Yeah,
but,
well, I think, like I said, I'd have to look more closely at it. Um,
right.
yeah,
And there's other passages he uses. That was just one of them, but it seems to make sense since the sacrificed animals was basically taking, it was like a substitutionary thing, I think, um, and it represents God's wrath. So I think it makes sense that that would be a connection, and
could
so
be. It could be.
yeah,
I'm just not prepared to either.
yeah,
I'm not prepared to discount it or affirm
sure,
it in the moment. Have to
yeah.
that particular
And I know
information.
that this is like a new book that just came out. So it's not an idea that I think has been widely thought about yet. And he's gotten, I think he told me that he got these ideas from other things he's read as well. So it's not like it's brand new, um, but it's
Yeah.
not a common view for sure.
Yeah,
But
it's one of those things where, so I mentioned that one passage in Revelation 14 and that one passage in First Enoch that both have angels working together to gather sinners into one place and inflict
yeah,
wrath upon them, and it results in blood accumulating as high as a horse's chest or bridle. That seems to me like unmistakably one text alluding to another or borrowing from it. Like when
mhm,
I read that, there's no pause there for me. It's like, oh, that's quite obvious.
yeah,
But a passage like this, again, it's not impossible, so I'm not discounting it. But the reason I'm not so quick to just be like, oh yeah, I think that probably is what's going on, is because I
mhm,
fear that if I don't slow down and take the time to actually consider it more slowly, that what I could be doing inadvertently is uh, drawing a drawing a target, or how does the expression go? You draw a circle first, and then I forget how it goes. Anyways, something about taking the shot first and then drawing the bullseye around it, sort of thing.
mhm,
Um, so, yeah, on the surface, I I don't know what to think. It could be, but it also couldn't be.
sure,
That's a whole lot to say nothing
yeah.
much.
Mhm. My perspective in life is I did a whole video on systematic theology and traditions of men. And I find it very, very important to listen to all sides before, obviously to understand them, but also sometimes by hearing other sides of any issue, whether it's soul sleep or not, or this or whatever. I can often learn maybe things that they see that I haven't seen yet, and sometimes it takes me a while to like grasp a different perspective, not necessarily agreeing, but sometimes just it takes me a while just to see what they're seeing, right?
Mhm.
And so yeah, I'm fascinated by the whole concept of systematic theology and traditions of men, because oftentimes it's hard for us all to think the way somebody else is thinking, and I find that one of my challenges is to learn how to think how somebody else is thinking,
Mhm.
the best that I can, and that's how I can learn things that you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No.
And
Yeah. I
so
get you.
yeah, so whatever topic it is, that's what I try to do, and it's so this is just one of those. I'm not saying I'm 100% on it. I'm just saying like I do see something there, and
I will look into it.
it's
I will.
yeah, it's something that definitely should be studied. I think, or looked at more. I should say, and
Yeah.
so it's something I never thought about until somebody introduced me to this guy. So I never even it wasn't even a thought. So yeah, but of course, annihilation or conditional immortality wasn't a thought for me for until I heard it, right? And then it took me about 5, 6, 7 years to like be convinced. So, yeah. But yeah. So, do you have anything else, or we can wrap it up? Let me see if there's any. Yeah, no, there's no comments of note here on the comment board, but one of them is just warning us that the world's electricity will be turned out in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. Everything will be turned out eventually, and then a new heaven and new earth will come about, right?
Amen.
Whether it's in 2 weeks or 1,000 years.
And that's a change I welcome.
Yeah. So, yeah, but this second comment by Chuck is please get baptized to ensure eternal salvation. And I'll totally agree with that one. So anyway, unless you have any last thoughts, we can wrap it up here.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll try to very briefly, if I can, sort of wrap a bow on everything.
Sure.
So basically, what we did today was consider Revelation 14:11 more specifically, and more specifically in verse 11, the phrase "They shall have no rest day or night," and we looked to First Enoch as a lens through which we can better understand what that phrase means. What that doesn't mean is that Enoch is inspired or canon. I don't think that. It also doesn't mean that you can turn to First Enoch and use it to confirm doctrine, which again, what I said earlier is specifically you can't look at a teaching in First Enoch and say, because that teaching is in First Enoch, it's true. And that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're taking into account the fact that, okay, it's just a fact that the book of Enoch has influenced the language and thought of the New Testament, especially Revelation, as Ephraim Isaac says in numerous points of contact. We've looked at examples of that happening within Revelation 14 itself, with the horse and the blood and all of that. A very clear example, unmistakable example, where you have Enochian influence, or Enochic, I think it's Enochic, not Enochian, whatever, who cares. You have Enochic influence in Revelation 14 itself, unmistakably. And so if the book of Enoch uses language about the wicked having no rest in it, then it's probably fair to treat First Enoch not as a book that can confirm doctrine, but as a book that can serve as a dictionary of sorts.
How they use like allegorical language in certain senses.
Yeah, certain idioms, expressions, language. This is all related to language, not to doctrine. Yeah. So we treat it that way, not as a book to confirm doctrine. So when we look at First Enoch for that reason, for linguistic help, we figure out that there are two ways in which that phrase, "they shall have no rest," can be interpreted. Two ways that seem legitimate, two ways that seem like they can very well fit with the context of Revelation 14. And so therefore, when we look into that, we the first one being so based on First Enoch 62:14, which speaks of people resting with the Son of Man forever and ever. If we take it that way in Revelation 14, it makes perfect sense of conditional immortality. Because if they're annihilated, well, they're not going to rest with the Son of Man forever and ever. And again, we don't look to First Enoch for doctrine. So even if First Enoch says that the Son of Man is Enoch, that's not what matters to us. We can discount that and be like, Enoch's wrong.
Sure,
but
it's just how they use use idioms and stuff.
Right.
That would be kind of like if somebody 1,000 years from now wanted to study some teaching in America, and they come across a phrase that says everybody should go out and break a leg.
Yeah.
And if they're learning from this, whatever this teacher is, that some people might take that literally, but if they study like other American literature, they're going to find out what that means. Right.
Right.
Would you
Yeah.
say that's a similar?
Yeah, and here's another example. Let's say there's a certain author in the 21st century who has a number of books, and you call that series of books canon. They have like 5 different books, and it's one story that follows from one to the next. You could say those 5 books form the canon of whatever story and author we're talking about. And let's say in one of those books, in one of these canonical books, you have, let's say, the phrase break a leg, like you said. It wouldn't be illegitimate to look to something outside of the canon in the 21st century that uses the phrase break a leg to understand what that might mean in the canon.
Right.
You don't have to stay within the canon to understand certain idioms. Certain idioms can transcend the canon. They can be used in other pieces of literature, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So that the first example, the first way it can be understood, like I said, resting with that Son of Man forever and ever, and we would take the Son of Man in Revelation, of course, to be Jesus, or in the New Testament. The other way is the angels of punishment, while they're inflicting the wrath of God upon the unrighteous, they afford no rest to the unrighteous. There's no period where they can sort of relax and the pressure's off of them. No, it's the pressure's on until their final destruction, as is the case in First Enoch. And either of those ways of taking the phrase "they shall have no rest day or night" in Revelation 14 is legitimate, or it seems to me, and they both seem much more compelling than a traditionalist reading of that phrase.
And I found that a lot of Christian traditions developed in the centuries after Christ, where they started to bring maybe Greek philosophy thought into Christianity in some ways. So where they weren't thinking like the Jewish people, they were thinking like, a Greek or Roman people thought about these things. And so they would interpret these phrases the way that a Westerner might interpret them. And so that's why some of these things might be misunderstood. Like I said, with somebody 1,000 years from now reading break a leg and not understanding it, right? And then coming up with different interpretations of what was intended originally. So, I think this is all very, thought-provoking, because, only in the last 5, 7, 8 years that I've realized, that we can be stuck in our own culture and our own way of thinking and not necessarily think outside how another culture would think, right? And say certain things. So, this is definitely thought-provoking and interesting stuff. So, anything else before we call it a day?
That's pretty much it from me. I can plug my YouTube channel real quick.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah.
So I run a very small YouTube channel called Study is Key, and on that channel, I usually look into so it's kind of varied. There's no direct or specific topic that I always cover. But you'll find that most of my content in the beginning was, I think, salvation focused, specifically Roman Catholic proof texts for salvation by works. I put out a couple of videos about the Eucharist and whether transubstantiation is true or not. This is in the ballpark of what they're about. So you can look that up if you're interested. And I think that's pretty much all I have to
Okay.
plug. So,
Because I remember looking at your channel, James Harding, and I didn't see, if I recall, I didn't see much there. So Study is Key is the name of another channel.
it's the only channel.
Oh,
I don't
so
have a
what
James
is?
Harding channel.
Oh, that's just the name on this thing. Okay.
It's just my name.
Or maybe I tried looking
It-
it up on YouTube and I couldn't find you because I didn't know what it was called. So
yeah.
I will put that in the description as well. That's and that will be great. And yeah, I look forward to watching. Is that going to be on Rethinking Hell, the debate?
No, the debate's going to be on the Trinity Radio YouTube channel. It's going
Okay.
to be on June 2nd. Thank you for reminding me of that, by the way. Yeah, it's going to be on June 2nd. It's going to be me and Chris Date versus Stephen Hafley and Nathan Bozeman on the
Mhm.
topic of what happens in the intermediate state.
Yeah.
The specific debate thesis is deceased human beings are conscious from death to resurrection.
Yeah.
Stephen and Nathan will be affirming that, and Chris and I will be denying it. So
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I'm not conclusive on it myself, even though I lean towards a conscious soul in the intermediate state. But I'm definitely looking forward to hearing both sides of that issue. So I'll
when we end the stream here, we can talk about it for a few minutes.
Sure, sounds good. All right, see you all, and thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.